These aircraft were all ahead of their time, but for various reasons, they never achieved sustained commercial success or are no longer operational. First up, we have the XY Pogo. Conceived in the early 1950s, the Pogo was one of two entrants in a competition to develop a true vertical landing and takeoff airplane that could do what no helicopter could. It was designed to fly at very high speeds and land and take off in the space of its own shadow. The XY was lifted off and touched down rocket style on a spindly set of legs at its rear. After liftoff, it would then be transitioned to conventional forward flight. Pogo was not only extremely difficult to fly but also not fast enough to perform the missions the military needed it to do. The Harrier would be that airplane. Next, we have the Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet. Messerschmitt's diminutive single-engine rocket plane was actually built in sizable numbers toward the end of World War II. The rocket ship would blast off from a small strip as Allied formations flew by overhead and climb at speeds unattainable by any plane of the era to intercept the bombers. Then they would head back to base ultimately as gliders after the plane's rocket fuel ran out. At least 10 Me-163s survive to this day, and all of them are in permanent display status at museums around the world. Moving on, we have the Hughes H for Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose. The Spruce Goose nickname was catchy enough that it stuck, despite there being very little spruce involved in the construction. In fact, the H4 is mostly made of a birch plywood composite material. Today, the Spruce Goose makes its home at Evergreen Aviation Museum in McMinnville, Oregon. It is so large the museum itself would have to be torn down to set the Spruce Goose free. And now we have the BD-10. This was the world's first home-built supersonic jet aircraft. Controversial from the start, the BD-10 was designed for a single GE J85 engine, a pair of which power the supersonic Northrop F-5. The 2,950-pound thrust turbojet engine would in theory power the BD-10 to speeds up to Mach 1.4. That never happened. In fact, the jet never surpassed Mach 0.83 according to reports, and its range, originally targeted for 2,000 nautical miles, was limited to less than half of that. 5 airplanes were eventually built, 3 of them by startup companies aiming to get military contracts with the jet. 3 of them crashed, 2 after breaking up in midair, killing the pilots in all 3 cases. 2 BD-10s remain, one on display in a museum in Canada with no engine and the other owned by a Phoenix Fuel Additives company. Finally, we have the XB-70 Valkyrie. This experimental bomber was designed by North American Aviation in the 1950s. One of the most extraordinary aircraft ever built, the Delta Canard configured Valkyrie, dreamt up in the late 1950s, looks futuristic even by today's standards. Built to fly at altitudes in excess of 70,000 feet and at speeds over Mach 3.0, the atomic bomber XB-70 was built to outfly the surface-to-air missiles of the day. Soon, however, missile technology improved to the point that no matter how high airplanes flew, they were vulnerable to missiles. The XB-70's configuration also took advantage of the shock wave created by the leading edges, channeling them toward the wing's bottom to ingeniously create lift from the shock wave. One XB-70 remains. It is in the National Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. The second Valkyrie was destroyed during a photo shoot when an F-104 chase jet collided with the bomber. If you liked this video, you would love to see the first unintended flight of the legendary YF-16. Thanks for watching.